One of the coolest things that that I think you've contributed to Leading Agile to date is you've helped Dennis and I make explicit some things that were maybe more implicit, right? That we kind of had a notional idea about it, or we were attempting to do some things, but you've made them very explicit for us. And one of the first things that you kind of brought to the table with us is the explicit decoupling of what we would call now a system of delivery versus a system of transformation. And so help me understand, right, kind of in your words, what do you see as the distinction between system of delivery and system of transformation?
Sure. So when we first met and we were exchanging ideas, it was sometimes difficult to communicate because there were elements of just at that point, the system that we called it, elements of the system that I had to localize to a client that seemed frame breaking. But in reality, it's because they had a different scaled Agile model, not different change management model, not different way of going about and with outcomes helping teams and teams of teams to move to higher levels of business agility. So we had a hard time sometimes talking to each other and learning from each other because we didn't have that distinction. And so it was a necessity, I think, that was created along the way. Because there is no universal one system of delivery that, the universe wasn't created with only a single scaled Agile system of delivery that works, right? But there is some universality to change management and how people need to go through change and experience change and what works and what doesn't. And so I'm not saying it's moral right or wrong, but there are patterns that emerge again and again and again. And so, So by creating that distinction, I thought we were able to have better conversations. If we go into a client and there's a specific Agile system of delivery that we believe works, right? We're not going to help to implement something, install something, and scale it if we don't think it scales or works. That's not something that necessarily adds a lot of value for us to go say, well, no, the right one is this one. This is the only one. This is the right one. But we need to have a way to install that's not just systemic, but it's holistic. It's repeatable. It's all of that. So I thought creating that distinction could allow us to anchor on the things that we agreed upon that need to be done. Pretty much every time we do something as an organization, and then where we could engage with the client and take care of their local concerns. Yeah.
So let me see if I can put some of my words around it and see if you agree with me. So when we were talking about the system of delivery, right, we were talking about in general, the methodology, right? Things like SAFe or Scrum or large scale Scrum, something like that, right? One of the things that I think is cool about our interactions is we've also distinguished within the system of delivery, the difference between like what we might call a reference architecture versus a reference implementation, right? So team-based delivery, Kanban-based program and portfolio layers, different metrics, right? Those things become reference architecture, patterns that are kind of quasi-universal, and then specific implementations of those patterns, SAFe being a specific implementation, LESS being a specific implementation. We do custom implementations all the time with clients that are hybrids of lots of different things. And I think one of the things you were experiencing was that you were working with a client that had a specific reference implementation, right? That wasn't the Leading Agile model per se, right? It wasn't what our kind of default place was at the time, right? And so it was driving this conversation around systems of delivery and how dogmatic are we about the system of delivery. But the distinction for me is when we started talking about this idea of breaking organizations into expeditions and moving them through base camps, and then what turned out to be what we call outcomes-based planning and all the different activity definition and how you measure the transformation. That's when you coined the system of transformation phrase, right? And what was very powerful about it was the ability to distinguish the operating model that we're trying to help the client install versus how we were going to get to that operating model, right? So what are the patterns for how are we going to form teams and stabilize throughput across the organization? And what are we going to measure? And how are we going to start evaluating dependencies and economically weight which dependencies we're going to break, right? Those kinds of things. And to the point you just made, what's super fascinating is that what we found is that the system of delivery can be almost anything. The system of transformation is almost universal, we find ourselves doing the exact same things at almost every single client at this point.
And I would say, and we prove that when for whatever reason we don't, something doesn't work.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? One of the things that's really been driven home on your latest engagement is the idea of metrics. And, metrics can, a lot of people fight against metrics because it's like they're used for evil so often, right? Because they used to beat the teams up or whatever.
Right.
But what we found is if we can't demonstrate the value of the transformation in real economic terms, right? Real performance terms, then it's really difficult to actually keep people's attention and to justify the spend.
So beyond that, our clients have clients. They have CFOs, they have boards of directors, and they're making investments in this change.
Yeah.
So they've bought in to doing this Agile thing, and they've made strategic decisions that they're going to change how they work. If we can't show how that decision is driving improvement in terms of their ability to deliver to their business. It's not just us, right? It's them.
Yeah.
It's the sponsors who said, like, we've got to do this. And so it's not just beneficial. I mean, it's universally beneficial. The mantra that I've tried to use in our clients is if you have a system where Agiles are, metrics are being used for badness, right? They're being used to beat people up. The metrics aren't your problem. Back to Ron's point. It's probably not a place where a developer wants to work, right? So let's go at the behavior, right? And that's a change management problem. So let's eliminate the behavior, not the tool. And I think a lot of times in the Agile community, we start to withdraw tools because we are very work surface based. We're very horizontal. We don't have the change management in place. And the things we're creating, they start to be used for badness. Velocity is not necessarily a bad, example there, right? So velocity starts to be used to beat teams. Velocity is not the problem.
Right.
It's the behavior we need to remove.
Right.
And so, we focus hard on removing the behavior, not the tool itself.